maybe the ones in Puri are the only ones more beautiful. They're so beautiful. They just shimmer. And this song that he just sang, this was, Prabhupada used to sing this before every class. And he said, everything is there. It's actually a picture of Vrindavan. It's a whole mood of Vrindavan. And I was really feeling it sung by Brijvasi. Really intensely beautiful. And Prabhupada he would often go into ecstasy when he would sing this. You could tell he would just go into another realm. And I have to say, that was a very special thing that just happened. So I was a Prabhupada disciple. I got lucky. I have no idea why, because I certainly don't deserve the mercy that I received. But somehow or other, I met Srila Prabhupada in 1967, at a time when there were no books, no temples, no deities, nothing except Srila Prabhupada, and somehow it was enough. It's still kind of enough, but we just got lucky. Now we have beautiful temples, beautiful deities, and I really hope Lord Jagannath needs a big, beautiful temple in Berlin, or maybe just outside the outskirts of Berlin. Like a farm, with a big, beautiful temple. I mean, he certainly deserves it. So I don't know my audience, but to see there's a lot of nice Indian students or tech guys here. So I'm really humbled because you know more than I do, much more. But I got lucky. I just got to be around Prabhupada when I was young. So the first time we met Srila Prabhupada, he said, we had a fever of anxieties. It was a very rough time in history. There was the Vietnam War, and everyone was scared of being drafted into it. My husband, or fiance, was living in fear of being drafted into this political war. We've always got political wars going on. And Prabhupada often said these wars are a result of animal killing. Every 10 years, your young men have to be killed because you're killing animals. And this is a big problem in the West. And so Srila Prabhupada listened to our fever of anxieties. I was in anxiety about a lot of things. But my future husband, Gaurasundar, was draft age. Draftable age, meaning he had left college and so he could be drafted. So we gave him all of these, we told him how we hadn't found, we were seniors in college, by the way, we weren't hippies. And that's a propaganda. Everybody wasn't a hippie. So we told him all of our anxieties, and he sat there and listened very patiently. He asked a few questions. He asked what we were studying in college, and we were studying art and literature and so forth. And he asked us, he asked me, because I had traveled to Europe already. I had traveled quite a bit, even though I was only 20. He was surprised, and I looked also very young then. He said, "You're so young, you've traveled so much?" And I said, "Yes, but none of it has made me happy." And that's the problem that we all face in the material world, wandering here and there from country to country or birth to birth, but none of it makes us happy. Maybe for a little while, and then it gets old. I had already at the University of Texas, I remember only months before I met Prabhupada, I was sitting on the grassy knolls at the University of Texas, and I was actually thinking to myself, Everything I ever wanted, I've gotten by focusing my will on. Whatever car, whatever boyfriend, whatever college, whatever, you name it. But none of it ever made me happy. And I remember sitting there asking myself, what would actually make me happy? With tears, you know, it's just, you can't imagine this because you grew up in a culture, those who are Indian boys here, you grew up in a culture that gave your interest to us. You can't imagine what it's like to grow up in total darkness. It's the most difficult thing to grow up and reach your age of 15 or 18 and not know what your life is for, not have any meaning, not be sure what it is you've been born for. This is what we experience. You don't experience that so much as we do. So he said, "Oh, you have traveled so much?" And I said, "Yes, but none of it has made me happy." And he got a big smile and said, "Ah, yes, that is required, because you have to be a little burned out in order to come to the point of Krishna consciousness. In order to come to the point of asking, who am I, and what is my duty in life, and what is it I'm born for, what is it I'm supposed to do? I know that I'm not a cat or a dog, and I know that I can think, but I don't really know what I'm here for." Anyway, Srila Prabhupada listened to all of our anxieties, and at the end of it, he said, "You just come to my classes morning and evening, and all problems will be solved." Panacea. And we believed him. And by the way, it worked. And it just works just as well today as it worked 60 years ago or 50 years ago, however many years ago that was. 1967 is how many years? 50-something years. So the problems that we have, there's always going to be problems in the material world. That's the nature of the material world. But there's a different approach. We can kind of float a little bit above them, even whenever they're difficult, whenever they're really excruciating. We have a little bit of leverage. We can float just a little bit above them, and sometimes we can actually kind of feel like we're a witness and we're watching a movie and we're the star in the movie. That takes a little practice, but it is possible. And there's different approaches to bhakti. You know, bhakti, I mean, you guys know more about bhakti than I do, because you've grown up in a culture that breathes bhakti, especially in Vrindavan. But sometimes it's mixed with the yoga systems, I mean the hatha yoga and the meditation yoga type systems, because it is one of the yogas, but I mean it is bhakti yoga, but still sometimes it's mixed with those. And sometimes it's mixed with like a self-help psychology type of approach. And sometimes it's kind of like a bridge preaching. Maybe people talk about various other subjects in relation to Krishna consciousness. And all of these are helpful, but we have to be very careful not to lose the original teachings. The original teachings of Srila Prabhupada, the pure stuff, the actual essence of Krishna consciousness. So I have come to the conclusion that there's two essential things that we have to verse. There's two essential things that will help us, because there's always going to be problems, and there's always going to be a certain amount of disagreement, bickering. Nowadays, everybody's got a different opinion about everything. You know, we can't even agree on which thing to stick into the computer to charge it. We have to discuss it. We have to argue about everything. So I have this verse that I want to read, and it is, I just lost it. This is Srimad Bhagavatam, Srila Prabhupada Srimad Bhagavatam, original versions. My dear Lord, it's 4:20:25. My dear Lord, you are glorified by the selected verses uttered by great personalities. Such glorification of your lotus feet is just like saffron particles. When the transcendental vibration from the mouths of great devotees carries the aroma of the saffron dust of your lotus feet, the forgetful living entity gradually remembers his eternal relationship with you. Devotees thus gradually come to the right conclusion about the value of life. My dear Lord, I therefore do not need any other benediction, but the opportunity to hear from the mouth of your pure devotee. So the transcendental vibration from the mouth of a pure devotee is so powerful that it can revive the living entity's memory of his eternal relationship with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. In our material existence, under the influence of illusory Maya, we have almost completely forgotten our eternal relationship with the Lord. Exactly like a man sleeping very deeply who forgets all his duties. In the Vedas it is said that every one of us is sleeping under the influence of Maya. So we must get up from this slumber and engage in the right service. For thus we can properly utilize the facility of this human form of life. Although when a pure devotee speaks, the articulation of his voice may resemble the sound of this material sky, the voice is spiritually very powerful because it touches the particles of saffron dust on the lotus feet of the Lord. As soon as a sleeping living entity hears the powerful voice emanating from the mouth of a pure devotee, he immediately remembers his eternal relationship with the Lord, although up until that moment he had forgotten everything. So, the reason I'm reading this verse is because we need to understand that Srila Prabhupada's voice is strewn with the lotus dust from the lotus feet of the Lord, the saffron dust from the lotus. And that's why when we hear him sing, we hear his bhajans, we hear his speech, his lectures, it penetrates our heart and we can make very quick advancement in spiritual life. But I mean, it says it right here, it wakes you right up. So what I want to point out is, and the reason I'm bringing this up is because I discovered last year when I took a trip to a Sadhu Sangha festival in America, it was a 5-hour drive, and the somewhat young man, not very young, but younger devotee, who drove me, I asked, can we hear Prabhupada lecture, Prabhupada Kirtan? He had dozens of Kirtan tapes. He had dozens of lectures. He did not have one single tape of Srila Prabhupada. And he's been a devotee many years. And I realized that people don't understand that not all Kirtans are created equal. Not all voice is created equal. And so I decided that I need to bring this point up so that people do understand it. And devotees, you have to understand, when I came in 1967, we had no books. We didn't even have a Gita. Prabhupada had a Gita that he spoke from, but every other verse he would say, this guy's a rascal and this is not correct. I think, why bother to read it then? So I didn't, we didn't have a Gita until end of 68, which was 2 years there was no 2 years. There was no Gita. 2 years that I was with them. First 2 years there was no Gita. And we didn't have any deities either. Well, we had the beginning of Jagannath worship, but what we did have was Srila Prabhupada and his voice, his bhajans. I would sit just like where she's sitting, near his little, and Vyasa-san was just a little raised platform. There was nothing fancy. We were doing good. I mean, we had just a dingy little storefront, smaller than this, and dingier definitely, because this is not dingy. It's very nice and well put together. But this is this is all brand new. When I actually met Prabhupada, that little storefront had only been opened 2 or 3 days. And we came all the way from Texas, which is very mystical also because there was no PR, there was no books, there was no magazines, there was nothing. And yet we had Srila Prabhupada's voice. We had every day we would hear him sing his prayers to his spiritual master. And even to this day, that's my favorite thing, is listening to prayers to the spiritual master. I go into complete trance. I was into yoga before, and so it was easy for me to hear and just let it go into my heart. And it's exactly like a golden thread that goes from your ear to your heart, and then your consciousness raises and expands. And it's a really nice feeling, And so I became quite addicted to that. I really like to hear him speak. In fact, later on one time, something happened where I came in late. It's a story I don't want to get into, but I came in late to a program, and he said, "Oh, I was wondering how you could stay away. You love to hear me speak so much." And it's true. This is what brought me, this is why I'm still here 60 years later, or 50 years, I'm not sure which it is. You lose track of time when you get so old, But basically, this is why I'm still here. And so I want to encourage devotees to hear directly from Srila Prabhupada. And the second point is, and this is something that really has dawned on me in the last year or so, is we need to hear about Srila Prabhupada. We need to hear how he dealt with his disciples, how he dealt with dignitaries, how he dealt with anybody, everybody. He's such a gentleman, such a very kind, loving, polite, and humble. Very humble also. We have many people now, because many Prabhupada disciples are leaving or have left. Many of my most beloved godbrothers and godsisters, especially the godbrothers, they've gone because the girls usually live a little longer. But Brahmananda's gone, although there are some that are still here. And but we won't be here much longer. There's not too many more years that you'll find Prabhupada disciples on this planet, because the human body has an expiration date. And so what we have now is a lot of people who are speaking, and they know shlokas perfectly, and they can chant shlokas perfectly, but they never met Prabhupada, so they don't have a clue how he dealt with others. And I think this is the source of a lot of the problems that we have in our dealings with one another, because after all, we don't come from a culture that teaches a lot of Vaishnava etiquette, to say the least. We don't come from cultures that really understand a lot of these things. So I think what's very important at this point is to hear directly from Srila Prabhupada and to also hear about him. There are many memoir videos that have been done by Siddhanta. There are many books that have been written by various devotees like Shamsundar Mukunda, Yamuna, so many, who early disciples who spent a lot of time with Srila Prabhupada. And their books are full of information and love also. And so this, I think, is something that would really be a great addition to everyone's bhakti, to everyone's understanding of how Prabhupada dealt with others, so we can get an idea how to deal with others, because we don't always have a clear picture of that. And that would solve a lot of problems, because sometimes it seems like there may be sort of impersonal dealings amongst devotees. I don't see this so much true with the Indian set, but I see this a lot with Westerners, because we don't really come from a warm, loving, we don't all come from a culture that supports that. Some do, perhaps. But I think this is something that will help, because our movement has such bad PR so far as the way that the children have been treated and the way the women are treated. And that would be a great addition. There is a book that, I've written a little book, as you know. This little book is about Prabhupada. My sparrow contribution. Sparrow means little bird, right? It's my contribution. It's called A Place of Sandalwood and Roses. And it's kind of an entry-level book. It talks about my search for truth as a Westerner, as growing up in Western culture, and growing up in a chaotic time in the 60s. And it talks about how I was searching for truth, like, why am I born? Like, well, who am I? What's it all about? And I was very discouraged, because at that time, there weren't yoga studios on every corner. At that time, there was very little information. Now you have so much more. Well, you have so much more because Prabhupada came and brought so much more. But at that time, there was very little. And it's, I'll read the back of it, because that way you probably get a better idea what the book is about than if I try to tell you. How do we get to that place of sandalwood and roses where eternity, wisdom, and bliss prevail? Enter that sacred place within the memoirs of a young seeker lost in a world gone mad. Navigating through the cultural chaos of late 1960s America, her restless search for the why leads her to the practice of yoga meditation. I was very much into yoga meditation, my own self-silence. I didn't have a teacher yet. In fact, my little book, I had one little book that said, when the chela is ready, the guru will appear. So I was trying to make myself ready so that guru would appear. And by the way, he did. So then, one day, she picks up a magazine in a metaphysical bookshop and reads an intriguing description of a Swami who has come from India to teach the ultimate spiritual path of Bhakti Yoga. Witness firsthand her ecstatic joy as she discovers the transcendental world of her beloved Guru, Srila Prabhupada, is Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, and how through loving service to him, a destiny beyond her wildest dreams is revealed. So this little book, somehow or other, this is me taking dictation while Prabhupada is talking about some transcendental Vaikuntha world with an ecstatic expression on his face. And so I've brought this to you in hope that some of you will be interested in having this book and reading it. It's kind of entry level. A lot of questions are answered. And this is another book that's very interesting. This book I didn't write. It's actually compiled by one of my god sisters. And this book is available on Amazon. It is very nice because it's a bond of love, Srila Prabhupada and his daughters. And many stories of over 150 small essays from different devotees who have been devotees for many, many years. And one of the reasons that I was so impressed by this book is because I had a really lot of association with Srila Prabhupada. But a lot of my god sisters saw him one time maybe. Or maybe they didn't, maybe they got a letter in the mail with their beads. And yet, what impressed me most was that 50 years later, they're still serving, and they have developed a relationship of service and separation. And it's possible for them, it means it's possible for you too. And that is why I thought this book is so worthwhile, because you can understand that it's possible to develop an ongoing relationship of loving service with Srila Prabhupada. It's a spiritual relationship. It's reciprocal. And because, I don't want to get into too complex philosophy, because I don't know if there are new people here or not, but we basically believe that the Lord is in our heart, along with, we believe that we're soul, and the Lord is also in our heart as well. And because the pure devotee, like Srila Prabhupada, is present with Krishna all the time, he can also be in touch with us because he's with Krishna, and Krishna's in our heart. Now, I hope that's not too complicated a concept. You guys get that pretty easily, the Indians, right? But for Westerners, we're a little thick, you know. So it is possible. It's sort of like, it's not omnipresent and it's not omniscient, but God is omniscient, right? And God is omnipresent, right? God is in our heart. He's inside and outside, everywhere. So a pure devotee like Srila Prabhupada is in touch with the omniscient, with the omnipresent at all times. And that way, he can actually know if we are in touch with him, he can help us. We can actually turn to him and ask for help. There are many instances of this. Many. I mean, I could go on all night talking about this one particular thing, but that's not what I plan to talk about. But sometimes you don't know what you're going to talk about. It just kind of happens. But basically, this is one of the things that I felt should be shared so that devotees understand they can ask for help, Srila Prabhupada. And he will be able to guide them because he's always in touch with Krishna, and Krishna's always in touch with us because he's in our heart. Right? That concept. I know I'm not very good at this explaining things. So I think probably, I don't know how much time I actually have.
You can go on. 15-20 minutes.
But I wanted to see, I don't know, I know a few of you, but not many. I know Baba Sindhu, I know a few people here, but not that many. I know the cake bakers from yesterday. I met the cake bakers when they came in the kitchen and baked a cake for the show hunting. It was a mysterious event. We had no idea what was going on. They told us afterwards, oh, we're going to a party. And they decorated it so carefully with the blueberries. Yeah. But I don't know that many others, and so I thought maybe you might ask questions, what you want to hear about. I mean, I don't know. I'm trying to cover basic things, and one of the other things I think is sadhu sangha. It's very important to develop friendships with devotees because those can sustain you through the rough times that invariably come in life. But what is it you want to know about? Does anyone have any questions? Well, we got some right now. What do you do? Take the thing over there, or do you have another one, or how do you do it?
We'll circulate. You can go.
So it's like Yamuna Devi Dasi Mataji is one of your god sisters, and I wanted to ask, it's like we hear this Govindam Adi Purusham song in
Louder.
louder to ask you, it's like Yamuna Devi Dasi Mataji, your god sister, she composed the song Govindam Adi Purusham for deity greeting. And so if I want to ask you, how was her like, because I never got really good answer from anybody about her.
Really?
Yes.
Oh, she's a great devotee. Great personality. I feel like a little worm at her feet. She's a very wonderful devotee. And she's written a beautiful book. It's so heavy it might fall on you. Because I wrote my book small because my god sister said, we want to be able to lay in the bed. Don't write it as big as the Munas because if you'll need a chiropractic adjustment. It's a huge two volumes. It's called Unalloyed. You should get those books. Very nice. It's actually written by her very close friend, but there are many quotes from her and amazing things that they did in England. She was an amazing devotee. We really need to know from these early devotees. Just like there's it's a crude example, of course, but the Bible, for example, you have Matthew, Mark, and Luke, and John. And those were the guys that were around Jesus. And they didn't make any great claims of their own, but they wrote about Jesus. Okay, so we're not making any great claims, but we're saying that this is how it was to be around Srila Prabhupada. And the generations that are coming, yours, your children, your grandchildren, they will want to know what it was like to be around Srila Prabhupada. And Yamuna's book is wonderful. You can order it. I'm sure you can. Bhaktivedanta Library Services. You know what that is, don't you? BLS in Belgium. They have. And another one, and I have to tell you, this is one of my favorites, is Shyam Sundar's book. Chasing Rhinos with the Swami. Has anybody read that? I mean, that's a guidebook for sure. Lots of action, but it's beautiful. And the thing is that Shyam Sundar, and the sounds of the material world. Ambulances and police cars. Well, this is where we are right now. Anyway, so the Shyam Sundar's books are wonderful. He traveled with Prabhupada for about 3 years. And he was his secretary, and everybody had a different relationship with Srila Prabhupada. I had a more I was very mothering and protective, but also very on reverence, But Shyam Sundar they had a relationship like pirates or something. They would do wild things, very wild things. Like I remember there's one story he told me about how there was some kind, I don't remember, there was a break in the road or a wide, impossible to get across place. So Prabhupada had him back the car up and then really hit it hard. And he said it was impossible. They literally flew over it. So these are the kind of events with Shyam Sundar. And of course, he talks about how George Harrison donated the money because Shyam Sundar and I did a program in LA about, 10 years or something ago. And the theme of it was the mystical side of Srila Prabhupada, which, see, I was most attracted and most attached to that because I was so much into mystic yoga before. He has his own life. Shyam Sundar talks about how Prabhupada wanted to print a Krishna book. Now you have to understand how poor we were, how incredibly poor we were. And so he wanted about $19,000 to print Krishna book. And Shyam Sundar's, you know, if I start asking him for money, that's what everybody does. You know, he's a rich, famous rock star. And I don't know. Shyam Prabhu said, just ask him anyway, you know. So Shyam Sundar relates the story, because it's kind of mystical, really, how he went to a dinner with some other, I think it was a sculptor. They had a dinner with George Harrison, along with a couple other people. And so Shyam was like trying to like get up the courage to ask. Finally, he realized, you know, I got to do it. I got to ask. So toward the end, he said, Srila Prabhupada has this book he wants to print called Krishna book, and also I think he had the manuscript or some of the papers to show him. And Shyam said the energy got real dark, like oh, these guys are like all the rest, you know. And then all of a sudden, there was a giant lightning bolt, and all the lights went out in the house. It was like stark dark. And then after a few minutes, they came on, and everyone was kind of in shock. And George said, "How much do you need?" And so Shyam said he drove home that night to the Beauty Place temple, and he was tiptoeing up the stairs, hoping to get, you know, but Prabhupada's light was still on. And so he said, Shyam Sundar, call him. And so he went in, and Prabhupada had a big smile on his face. He says, I told you he would help us. In other words, there are many things like this that are just very interesting. And I mean, I can remember one thing in Yamuna's book where she's talking about they're walking in the high grass at the Tittenhurst, you know, the estate, and it's very wet. England is wet, you know, muggy, wet, horrible place. Anyway, I don't like. Anyway, the grass was very high, and they were wearing wellies. That's some kind of boots that they wear. And so they're walking through the grass, and the grass is laying down where her, and she looks back, and there's no footprints. She has footprints, but there's no footprints from Prabhupada. And a lot of devotees, when they met Prabhupada, would actually say, he didn't really look like he was touching the ground, he looked like he was floating or something. And maybe he wasn't, maybe he was really touching the ground, but it appeared there was something about him that just seemed to be, in my opinion, like a saffron swan that just glided in. And then glided to the next universe, and maybe the next one, and we got to have a chance to witness this Leela. And I really believe it is Leela. I had this happen to me, and it's one of the reasons I realized I had to write a book, is because many years ago, I was in Vrindavan at Srila Prabhupada's rooms in Radha Damodar Temple. That's where he says, I live eternally. And I was there visiting and sitting down and chanting, and the pujari came in and with a plate of fruit and asked me to offer it. And there was just like a little, one of those little, what do you call them? I don't know, there's a name for them. It's like a little flat thing with legs, little short legs. And so he asked me to offer the prasadam, and there's just a picture. It's very simple. It's not a fancy place. Anyway, he asked me to offer the prasadam, and so I sat there chanting with the little kartals, singing just for a few minutes, and a strange thing happened. I was just chanting, and I started seeing in my mind's eye Prabhupada landing at airports, walking on the beach, just like a movie started happening, but I wasn't doing it. It was happening, but I wasn't creating it. I wasn't thinking it. It was just happening. And it was like him speaking in classes, walking here, walking there, landing in airports, kirtans, just, it was quite blissful, actually. And I just was chanting and watching this movie in my mind. And I realized it's a Leela. It really is like a Leela. And therefore it should be shared. It should be shared with others. And that's why I decided that I had to write about this, my little portion of it. I mean, we all had, just like a giant movie, we all maybe saw this much, and we saw that much, and so forth. So that people can understand that this Leela is eternal. It's not over. It's still going on. You can tap into it, just like Krishna Leela. Krishna Leela is still going on. In Vrindavan, people know this. We may not be able to see it. We just hear the honking and all the hustle and bustle. But some people are able to tap into that Leela. And I think that what we've been given is the opportunity to tap in to this Leela of Srila Prabhupada. And by doing so, we actually get purified. We actually get attracted to Krishna. We actually get attracted to the holy name, to Lord Chaitanya. Because he's the magnet. Srila Prabhupada is the magnet drawing us. He's the one, the mercy magnet, drawing us to Lord Chaitanya. What do we know about Lord Chaitanya? I mean, you guys may, you Indian boys, but as Westerners, we never heard of Krishna. We never heard of Lord Chaitanya. If my husband, he passed away, he wrote a book many years ago, and on the back of it he said, anyone who knows anything about Krishna must have heard it from Srila Prabhupada. Well, that applies to the West, it really does. Because there was no one else at that time. Now there may be people coming, now that may be true, because there are many teachers who have heard it from him. But at that time, there weren't. So I think this Leela is really important. And there's so many things, like he introduced the Tulsi plants, the worship of the Tulsi plants. In every temple in the world, people are walking around, circumambulating in the morning. And every morning, in every temple in the world, Yamuna's voice, Govindam prayers rings out. I mean, he's created what's so still shocking to me is, because I was around when none of this existed, all this didn't exist. This culture, the girls wearing gopi dresses and dancing, the guys doing the pujari work, all these things didn't exist. None of this stuff existed 60 years ago. I grew up in America. I can tell you it did not exist. I don't think it existed in Germany either. No, it didn't. But it's all happened. And what's so amazing is Srila Prabhupada has actually created a whole international culture. It's all over the world. You can go to Mexico and you'll see the same thing. You can go to South America, you go to a temple there, you'll see the same thing. You go to Russia, you go, all these, maybe they're slightly different. I mean, they prefer noodles in China, and they prefer spaghetti in Italy. I mean, but it's prasadam. It's still prasadam, it just happens to be a different type, And I think in Germany they like bread with lots of butter. And in China they like lots of noodles, but it's still, or pizza maybe in Italy. But maybe it's not, doesn't matter. See, I personally don't believe that Srila Prabhupada, the Vedic culture was very beautiful, is very beautiful, but it's not our main goal to make things suddenly Vedic culture, because how can you? How can you do this? We're trapped in we have jobs, we have to pay rent, we have to do so many things, drive cars, run computers. But what Chaitanya did was he gave something very easy. And this is another point that I really want to bring up, and that is the importance of Harinam. Harinam Sankirtan on the streets. This is something that's been really minimized or maybe sort of lost in time in America. I don't know about here. But now they have a lot of nice retreats where you go to the Marriott, 3 days, you pay $500. It's really nice. They got nice prasadam and everybody's chanting and you can see all your friends and wear your best clothes. But that's really not what Harinam is about. Harinam means going out on the street. And I only understood this in the last year because I have a friend, a godbrother actually, who is German and who was here in the early times in Germany. And he has told stories about how the devotees would go out, try to do Harinam, and the police would bring them in. They'd spend a half a day in the police station, then they'd go to the next place, and the same thing would happen. It was a very tough time. Germany was back in the early 70s. And he was saying how people would sometimes surround them and yell and talk and object, and because a very intellectual a lot of arguing. And he commented, because he was at the Rath Yatra last year at Leipzig, he commented that people have changed. They walk by, they don't yell, they don't argue, they don't do all the stuff they used to do. Instead, they may scowl, they may smile, they may ignore it at Rath Yatra, they just may keep walking. But what I realized is they've changed. It melts down the sinfulness of the culture. So that gradually, not that they're going to become devotees and come to your temple, they probably won't. But inadvertently, they're hearing. Just like the other day we had the Rath Yatra, and we had some great Kirtans, and there was some football game, a very important football game, because people were walking by with German flags on their face. They were wearing fuzzy hats with the German flag on them. There were hundreds of people going to this football game and walking right by the Rath Yatra and right by the Kirtan, And so this is what Rath Yatra is about. This is what Harinam is about. This is called reaching the culture. It's the way. Oh, he's coming back. And all those football fans got to see Lord Jagannath, which was a real blessing for all of them. So, I just kept talking and I didn't ask for any more questions, and I really should, because I may just be talking about things that I'm interested in. But
I had a question about what was the dynamic like, or what was Prabhupada's mood like in the early days between like men and women in the temple, and like the way he treated his like daughters and the, because I know it's potentially, I feel like it's changed over the years, but I wanted to just hear your perspective and your experience.
boy, that's a tough one. That's a loaded question, and you know it, don't you? Yes, it has changed about 180 degrees at least. That's one reason I'm recommending that everyone read A Bond of Love, so that you can find out how Srila Prabhupada dealt with his daughters and his children, and the children too. And also, you can see that Siddhanta has done a lot of videos, I'm sure you know. Unfortunately, there's a lot of immaturity because of you're taking this very spiritual culture and trying to superimpose it on the American Rakshasa culture. And it didn't exactly fit very well. It's like there are some weird things that came about. We had a number of very young, passionate young men that were accustomed to having girlfriends from 14 years old probably. And so they suddenly decided to be brahmacharis, and what else could they do but hate women, right? One in particular tried to send all the women to Australia, tried to make it so that the women couldn't come in the temple rooms. And Prabhupada blocked it again and again and again. He told them, hey, go to the forest if he eventually sent him to China. But anyway, the thing is, I'm not kidding. But the problem is that attitude, and by the way, that guy did change as he got older, but the attitudes that grew up at that time, unfortunately, have colored our movement in such a way that Yamuna even said once, no intelligent woman would ever join ISKCON. She actually said that once. And I have god sisters who tell their daughters, don't go near ISKCON, even though they're raised as devotees, because of these weird, very weird social attitudes, which I don't think you guys are even that aware of them. The Indian guys you have no clue what I'm talking about. But everybody else does know what I'm talking about. So, anyway, yeah, it's changed a lot, but it's also a work in progress, which is, and what basically is going on is you have a lot of young people growing up now, and they have more vision, they have more understanding, and also you have to consider one other thing. Prabhupada used to say, the demigods are lining up to take birth in this movement. Everybody's heard this, haven't they? Well, demigods have a little higher consciousness than, hopefully, and so there will be souls coming in from, and like I was telling my friend the other day, that I was in Mexico, and there was a young girl from Chile, and you know how girls talk about, oh, how'd you become a devotee? We sit around and talk, that's what girls do. And we were asking her, how did you become? She was like an 18-year-old book distributor, and she said, well, she had this dream, and she was like floating in a very beautiful heavenly place, and she saw a golden palace in the distance, and she floated over to that place, and there was a big golden gate, and she pushed it open, and Prabhupada was there inviting her in. I mean, that's before she became a devotee. So, who knows where these kids are? I look at some of them, I look in their eyes, and I go, hey, what planet did you come from? Where did you come from? Sometimes they're just such beautiful souls. So, they'll hopefully have a better upbringing with less conditioning, like Kalindi, this lovely little girl that's traveling with me. She's only 15. She's never eaten meat. She's never been abused. She has 2 devotee parents. Both her parents are together and they're devotees. And her 2 brothers are devotees too. Now, how lucky can you get? And they're older brothers too. I didn't have that. And I'm sure a lot of you haven't. So she won't have the same problems that a lot of us have to deal with, the kind of baggage or emotional baggage or whatever. So I consider, I'm a spiritual optimist. I think it's getting better. But we have to be a little bit aware that there were problems, and one of the main problems, as Prabhupada also pointed this out too, is personal ambition. You can have personal ambition for the job that you're doing, or if you're a teacher, or a basketball player, or a cricket star, you can have personal ambition. But you can't have personal ambition in bhakti. Bhakti and personal ambition are diametrically opposed. And what you had was a lot of young people, especially the young men, who've been raised with the concept of personal ambition. How do you get rid of it? You can't. They could. They were young. They were in their 20s, and hot-blooded American ambition gotta get out there and you gotta be successful and all this stuff. And this is incompatible with bhakti. It's okay for your profession. You want to be the best doctor? That's fine. You want to be the best lawyer? That's a different area. But if you want to be a devotee of Krishna, personal ambition is the opposite of Krishna consciousness. Krishna consciousness is total surrender to the will of Krishna in our heart. Not that I'm going to do this so that I can become a big, important sannyasi and have lots of disciples and lots of money and lots of power. That ain't it. That's not bhakti. It's just not. It's the opposite. So these are things that we're learning. It's a work in progress. Did that answer your question? As tactfully as I could, without stepping on toes. Okay, there's two guys back there. I don't know if I'll be able to hear you from up here.
Mike. I just would like to ask if you would have to give any advice to someone in his early 20s, what would you advise to this person?
If I would have to give advice to someone in their 20s?
Early 20s, yeah. I'm in my early 20s.
Well, I think that I think Prabhupada has given a pretty complete advice for anybody in their 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, or 60s. You know, you have to understand what about Krishna consciousness by reading, by studying, by chanting, do some austerity. Of course, you know that we follow the basic rules of no non-vegetarian food and so forth, right? And we avoid drugs and all that stuff. So you know about that, the 4 regs. I mean, that's the kind of basic stuff. So I think that the advice that I would give would be the same advice Srila Prabhupada gives. Who am I? I'm nobody. Srila Prabhupada has given us all of this. So I would recommend that you actually take up a very serious study. Listen to his tape. You speak English, right? You understand English well? Right, you're in German. Well, some people just speak German in Hindi or something. So, so that would be a really good place to start. There are so many. There's this wonderful CDs of Srila Prabhupada, DVDs, whatever. Those little round things that you stick, whatever they're called. They're called Following Srila Prabhupada. And they're really nice because you can, and you can see them online too. You can see him landing at airports. You can see him dealing with others. And there's also memories as well. There's different tracks, there's people talking who were there at the time, like when he was in France. Yadavar and Vishaka, my godbrother and godsister, have done wonderful things in the way of preserving these memories. And they're for you, so take advantage of them. They're for all of you. They're for all of you that didn't get a chance to meet Prabhupada because you weren't born then. So take advantage of this wealth of information, wealth of wisdom that's there. And it will purify you to watch these. You will feel happier. You will feel more content. You'll have a better idea of what your life is for. Because that's what you're asking, is what is my life for? Okay?
Thank you very much.
You said before your class that often when Prabhupada would sing Jai Radha Madhava, he would sort of be in a state of ecstasy, and I was hoping that you could maybe tell one of these stories that where he seemed like he was like in this state of ecstasy and sort of in touch directly with the spiritual realm.
Yeah, definitely. You're asking if Srila Prabhupada was completely, definitely in touch with the spiritual world?
No, I was hoping you could, like, maybe if you could tell a story of one of these occasions where you remembered it, or where you saw how where you saw him directly, like in this state.
Oh, I said a lot of that. I would have to spend here all night here telling you. But I can tell you that when I first was a devotee, in fact, I described this in my book. Okay, here's another plug for my book now. I was very shy, and I wanted to know about this Lord Chaitanya falling in the water. He had told this story in the past, but I wanted to hear of it for some reason. And Prabhupada liked it if you were supposed to ask a question about the context of the lecture that he just gave. You shouldn't ask for something that's unrelated. So because of this, I was shy anyway. But finally, I got up the courage to ask about, this may not be on the subject, and I'd like to hear about the Lord Chaitanya falling in the water. And what happened was that he started to answer it, and it is described in here, and actually was recorded. There are very few things recorded in 1967, but we got lucky on that one. And so we were able to take verbatim in my book on that one. And Srila Prabhupada went into ecstasy. And I didn't understand because I was so new. I just know that everything got really quiet, and I felt like, I did something wrong. I was like, for me it felt like an hour. It was just a few minutes. And he had a tear running down his cheek. And then after the class, some of the devotees said, "Did you see Prabhupada had tears?" And like, I didn't understand at that time. I was really new. But what I surmised was, this is my own speculation, that here he was in this foreign country with literally, it was the hippie world in San Francisco, very animalistic, hedonistic surroundings, and yet somebody asks about Lord Chaitanya, and it somehow made him very happy. That's just what I surmised. But there were many times that he one time he did, and he said, "Oh, but I don't do that very often, though." Like, he was like shy about it. Yeah, he was shy about it. He did not display his bod. He did not display. But because I was his secretary for over a year, because not because I was anything special about me, it's just there wasn't anybody else. And so, therefore, I got lucky and got the job. There was, you can't quite conceive of it because this organization is so big. But the early times, there were only 10 or 12 devotees. There was no money. There were no temples. And Prabhupada was doing the cooking and the cleaning himself before he had his heart attack. It's not like there were, later on there were people lined up wanting to do things. Oh boy, there they are again. Is this an everyday thing in Berlin?
The police station is right there. It's not that dangerous. The police station is right there.
Oh, is
it's
that
not
right?
that dangerous here.
Well, then we feel very safe. Actually, we really feel safe, don't we? What was I saying? Because later on, like I said, there were hardly any tapes because we didn't have the money for a tape recorder. But my mother, I asked her to sell something I had, a sewing machine, and she sent me $400, which was a lot of money in 1967 and 1968. $400 was some money. And there was a devotee who was a sound man, a big U-Her, a big German tape recorder, the kind with the 5-inch reels, and which was the best there was in those days. In '68, this is before cassette tapes too. And so I used to record Srila Prabhupada every day. He loved, he liked, what's the matter?
I think the battery ran out, huh?
Oh, don't worry, I'm recording.
So Prabhupada loved recording. He would call me in every morning after his walk and his breakfast. And this is like in Los Angeles, and he would sing, and he would play harmonium, and then because a cassette doesn't do this, but the big U-Her, you could dub the mridanga over it. So then he would listen to it, and he would. If you're wondering who's playing the drums on those tapes that I recorded, they used to be called the Harmonium series, but they changed the name to the Vintage series. Those tapes, you hear the drum, and nobody can play a drum like that. That was him dubbing it over, because the cassettes don't do that, but the big U-Her could do that. So at that time, that was pretty high tech. I mean, I realize now it's nothing, but we were lucky we had this. And so Srila Prabhupada would sing, and often he would have tears, especially his favorite song was Hari Hari Bifale. My Lord, I have wasted my life. I have not served Radha and Krishna. I have wasted my life. And the thing we have to understand is he really felt this. He really felt, I've wasted my life. And yet, compared to us, So he would sing, and tears would, and this was an everyday occurrence because it was at home. When he would sing bhajans. That's why I'm encouraging everyone, listen to his bhajans. You will really understand what bhakti is. You will understand what pure love is by listening to his bhajans, and then he talks about the bhajan. Everyone familiar with these? They're called the vintage series now. And God bless U-Her. I don't know who he is, but I'm sure he got some brownie points for that. Mr. U-Her. Is there a Mr. U-Her that made the tape recorder? So, anyway, yes, that was many times. But he did not do this publicly. This was at home. This is in his room at home.
You touched upon the East and the West a bit, and you said that growing up in the West, it was difficult. I mean, people from India don't really understand what it is to grow up without purpose or without. You said a bit of that. If I compare with myself, so I was born in India, and that's in a way that's kind of true as well. Like I was born into a Krishna conscious family, and I didn't realize it when I was younger, but I do now, and. It was Vrindavan every month, it was Puri every other month, and there was no point in my life that there's no Krishna in my life, right? It's always been like that. But then as I grew older and I kept reading some of Prabhupada's books, I remember one thing, I'm going slightly off topic now, but it was mentioned, he said cleanliness is godliness, and which is why he said that, there's emphasis on taking a bath before you go to the temple, you be clean. And then I kind of always wondered, that if India is sort of the hub of Krishna consciousness and it's practiced so heavily, why can't the country be cleaner? Why is the West able to grasp that and not India, even though there's so much Krishna consciousness? I know it's a weird question.
I don't know if I understand your question. Are you asking why the West is not? Ask it again.
So, even Vrindavan, for instance, right? I've been going for the past 15 years, and
Wow.
every time that I go, the temple is absolutely beautiful. The feeling that you get when you see the deities is amazing. But as soon as you come out of the temple and you look at the roads and the construction infrastructure, it's getting dirtier as the years go on. And when Prabhupada said that, cleanliness is godliness, you should maintain a clean surrounding, you should pray in a clean environment, you should practice cleanliness within yourself. Go take, I mean, this is what I read. I'm paraphrasing, so I don't know the exact quote that he said. But why is that happening with Vrindavan and Puri and other of these states in India?
You're asking somebody that doesn't know. I don't know why. I know that Prabhupada tried very hard to get the politicians of India interested in Vedic culture. A lot was lost, I'm sure you know, 750 years of Islamic rule and then the British. So a lot was lost. Why it's still happening, I can't answer that, I don't know. Maybe it's because it's not a prayer. I mean, India has copied the West. You know that. I mean, maybe less now, I don't know. I mean, what's really nice is the Indian youth are growing up now. From my perspective, by the way, I'm not very educated on this, so if I say something wrong, just ignore it. But if, you know, what I see is a lot of the youth that come to the West, they become devotees, more than in India. They think that the West is where it's at, and when they come here, then they become devotees. They come to be tech guys, right?
So it's like connecting to this point, like when I was in India many years ago, like ISKCON temple we used to go like once in a month, but now we go like every week to the ISKCON temple, and then we get to do more bhakti, we get to see Krishna every week. But in India, just because there are many people, and then it's far away, and there's only one temple in the city in some corner, because it has to be big, you need a lot of space and everything. So it's like we had to wait a long time before we had to get to a Hare Krishna temple.
Well, that's another perspective. What he was just saying. I know I have some Indian friends who are tech guys in America, and they've told me that in India, they weren't that much interested in Krishna consciousness or bhakti. But when they came to America, I think they got to see what it was really like up close, what American culture or Western culture is like. And they got kind of homesick and started going to the temple, and the same smells, the same prasada, the same feelings, and they appreciated it more, and now they're very, very much devotees. So why, that's not really answering your question. He just commented on this. I don't know, maybe the politicians might have something to do with it. Maybe the politics might have something to do with it, that they don't promote or encourage. At least that was the case in the past when Prabhupada talked about it, that the years of the British rule, they tried to destroy the culture. They did everything they could to demolish it, you know. And one thing I've noticed is that there's like still a fascination with all things British. Maybe that's going away. I hope it's going away. But it was there in the past with you know, like because there was a mood that you're lesser. They made them think they were just like stupid and they can only be clerks, when it wasn't true. When actually the Vedic culture was the highest culture, but in order to rule, in order to rule and exploit, which is exactly what England did for, 300 years? I mean, they built some good trains. You got some good trains, that's good. And English is the Raj language, but Prabhupada said that's also very wonderful, because the English is the Raj language. You can spread Krishna consciousness all over the world. But what I'm saying is that a lot of the deterioration that we see is due to backing away from the original culture that India had. Appreciating the temples, appreciating the religion. It's all based in the religion. Prabhupada used to say that even in the West, most people don't have any idea what they're even born for. They're just kind of going through life blindly. But even a common man in the field, working in the field, understands that karma and basics, which is not true, in the West. But why all these things? This is something that you would have to delve into. I can't really answer that adequately, I don't think. I do know that Vrindavan is supposed to be disappearing. You know that, right? And that Mayapur is the place for this age, and Vrindavan is slowly... I went to Vrindavan in 1976, and I can only tell you that it's really changed. But that's my material vision. I don't have the ability to see what real, the real Vrindavan. Any more questions?
Hare Krishna Mataji. Thank you very much. Can you please explain how was it to opening the temple in Hawaii? Maybe short.
How was it to open a temple in Hawaii?
Yes.
It was nice. Prabhupada used to say that it was like leftover from a previous yuga. That the demigods used to play there. It was a very beautiful place. It's also changing, but it's still quite beautiful. And he spent a lot of time there. And when we first went there, we had no idea if this is where he told us to go, because I couldn't handle the cold. And he wanted me to be in a warmer climate, and Hawaii is quite warm. Similar to Bengal, actually. And it was, how was it? It was, well, that's kind of like a whole subject. It was very possible. Many young people go there, many yogis. It's considered to be what do you call it, a chakra? So many yogis are born in Hawaii. So very quickly we had many people who came and became devotees, and it was a very successful. We had one godbrother who was, his name was Siddha Swarup, and whenever Prabhupada gave him initiation, he said, "So you have come from the Siddha Loka to spread Krishna consciousness on this planet." I don't know if you know what the Siddha Loka is, but those guys have got powers. And so a lot of yogis are born there, and so it was actually very flourishing. And it still is. There's still lots of Krishna consciousness in those islands. It's the biggest vegetarian society in America. And does that answer your question? I don't know where to begin. It's like a whole adventure. Actually, I have a website, and I wrote some stories about that, about how things started in Hawaii. So you can look at that if you really wanted to know. HareKrishnaHawaii.com.
Thank you. I want to know, was it request from Prabhupada, and after this it was like a challenge for you, and you should go with your husband. Am I right?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Well, Prabhupada sent couples to places all over. He sent one couple to Los Angeles. He sent another couple to San Francisco, 2 couples to San Francisco. He sent 3 couples to London. He sent couples to open. His idea was to send couples to open centers in various cities by getting an apartment and inviting people over for prasadam and kirtan. That was how he spread the movement in the early times.
Sorry to disturb. Yeah, it's getting late. So maybe we can take last question, and then we can have personal one-to-one questions with you during prasadam.
Okay.
It's fine.
So you mentioned that.
Sean.
So you meant we were not fortunate to meet Srila Prabhupada, but we know because Prabhupada because of you. So I wanted to ask, maybe it's a personal question, like once Prabhupada went back to Godhead, what was the motivation of all the disciples? Like what kept them going for 50 years?
Love. Pure love. It's still keeping them going. pure love. That's why you should definitely order this book, Bond of Love, so you can understand how Prabhupada dealt with us and why this is daughters. I mean, there are other books written by guys, but this is actually why Srila Prabhupada, how he dealt with each one of us in such a way that 50 years later they're still serving and with love, pure love. There was no, in the very early times, there was nothing to gain. There was no position, there was no salary, there was no anything material. It was just devotion and love. And he gave us so much love, and we felt it. Just like when you look at the deities, sometimes you feel love radiating into your heart. Well, Prabhupada was like that, is like that. I don't want to say was, because Srila Prabhupada never went any further. He is actually still present in his spiritual form, and his books, and his lectures. He is very present, and people still I tap into him. I go through a hard time, and I'm asking, please help me, like that. And so that's available to everyone. You just have to have a little bit of understanding. So that's why I'm encouraging devotees now, in addition to learning shlokas and reading Bhagavad Gita, I think people need to read about Srila Prabhupada and hear from him so that it can soften things a little bit. It can soften it with his love as opposed to straight philosophy. Does that make sense to you? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Mataji, taking us to the 1970s and 80s era when the Srila Prabhupada was in the material world before his disappearance and sharing the pastimes of the Prabhupada. So let us thank Mataji. Let's raise our hands and let us thank Mataji by loudly chanting Haribo! 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 So we also request you to come again to Berlin and